Hey friends, welcome to another episode of Embracing Your Season. I'm your host, Paige Clingenpeel. I want to thank you so much for listening to this show. As a reminder, you can listen to the show on all major podcast platforms. And if you want to watch in video version, which is always fun to see my facial expressions because I never know what you're going to get. It's always a surprise. You can check us out on YouTube. If you happen to listen on Apple Podcasts, I would appreciate it if you give the show a rate and leave a review. Thank you so much. All right, today we have another amazing episode with Jeff Hamilton. Jeff has the privilege of helping people navigate life for over 30 years. He is a pastor, a husband, and a father. His passion area is to help people discover their life purpose, engage in meaningful relationships, and live God-glorifying lives. But today we're going to have the opportunity to talk to him about his Dad Academy. He is passionate about equipping men to be the best that they can be and passing that on to generations to come. Make sure you stay tuned till after my conversation with Jeff, because I'm going to share a few of my takeaways, which I think you would benefit from as well. So enjoy my conversation with Jeff Hamilton. Well, Jeff, I'm so excited that you're joining us today, and I look so forward to sharing with the audience your ministry with dads. But why don't you take a minute and just tell us a little bit about yourself and what your upbringing was even like?
Well, Paige, thanks for having me on. Currently, I serve as a senior pastor at Hills Church, and I do a lot of stuff. I'm still actively, we joked earlier that I was one of those guys that was demoted to senior pastor from youth ministry. So
Right.
like once my kids kind of grew up, I looked at my wife, I gotta do something. And so I had the opportunity to get involved in a local high school, private high school, where I still am involved in coaching kind of the three major boys sports as an assistant, basketball, baseball, and football. And through that, I get to actually work with coaches about how they use sport to disciple, create men and
That's cool.
women. And so, we get to come alongside parents in that way as coaches. And so those things, along with family, is really a passion of mine. My wife and I do a lot of marriage conferences with a ministry called American Family Living. And all this was kind of coming up from both of us, kind of grew up in ministry homes, my wife, Jamie, and I. Her parents in parachurch ministry, my dad and mom pastored for 40 years, along with serving in various roles, president of a Bible
That's
college,
incredible.
and yeah. And so it's really an amazing journey of just following the Lord. I kind of knew since I was a little kid that probably I would end up going into the pastoral ministry, and worked really hard in my teens to avoid that. And just had another encounter with God that he kind of grabbed me. And so I have had some great ministry assignments over the years. I was a youth pastor in Nashville during the late 90s and heyday of Christian music and youth
Yep.
ministry,
Oh,
kind of what was going on. And I love those days. But, the challenge always for me has been that in making Christ followers, it has to be more than that kind of event and gathering driven. And that's
yeah.
kind of been my method as a local church pastor. I've been here in South Orange County for 25 years, essentially at the same church. I think where the church is kind of like Apple operating systems, right? I think we're like 14.2. On the version of our church, but it's been a great journey. Married 32 years to my wife, Jamie. We have two kids, a son, Justin, who's just turning 28. He's been married for 2 years. He and his wife, they're youth pastors in Northern or Central California in Santa Cruz. So he loves to surf and hike and do all that kind of stuff. Even though I grew up surfing, like I do everything with a ball and a score. So, but he
Yeah.
and his
Yeah.
wife are just doing an unbelievable ministry in Santa Cruz. My daughter is going to be 26 in May, and we're just getting ready to kind of launch her out on her own. She's moving to New York City, Brooklyn, here in the next couple of weeks, and we're excited to see what God has for her as she steps out in faith and begins to follow Him as well. So that's a kind
Hmm.
of a little bit about me, and you just need to know you need to interrupt whenever you can, because as a preacher, you just keep rolling. So
Yeah, you keep going. That's fine. But I love the fact that you're sharing where your kids are now because my kids are still in the home. We have one that's getting close to graduating high school and we're not there yet, to release her into this world. And so I will be coming back and we'll be having this conversation, be like, okay, how did you do it well? How did you release? What do you still hold on to? All of those things because it's really hard that transition from having them in the home and managing their life to, moving them to New York City. Holy cow, that's a big deal. So no, I'm glad you shared that.
it's a really,
All
I
right.
mean, we talk about it from Proverbs, though, right? Train up a child in the way that they should go. And a lot of
Mhm.
times, as parents, we're so focused on training, we forget that the goal is the going, right?
Yes. That's the hard
And
part. Yeah.
so the it is the hard part. My wife's not too happy with me, teaching that for 30 years. She goes, "Now it's happening to us and I'm not ready," but that's the
Mhm.
joy, because I will tell you the greatest reward, Paige, is having an adult friendship with your children. Man,
Mm.
that is the reward. When they by their own choice invite you into their life to process decisions, or the fact that they just want to hang out with you and spend time with you, like that's the reward of all of the hard work that you do throughout your life. And I'm sure that you and your husband and your family are going to get to taste of those sweet fruits.
Yeah, and we're seeing some of it now, a little bit,
Absolutely.
especially with the older ones. But is there any like pointers that you and your wife could share about how you made that happen? You instilled those values or those communications when they were in the home.
Well, we both came from a pretty healthy family of origin, where there wasn't a lot of surface trauma. Um, but we both knew that there were some things that needed to be adapted, some expectations, some challenges that happened in our growing up that we just wanted to adjust for our kids. And I don't know that we have done that perfectly. But one of the things that we
Mm.
really tried to do is to take the Deuteronomy principle really to heart, from when they were little all the way through up, when it says, and you will teach them about these things as you walk along the way, as you rise up, as you go to bed. That we didn't make faith something that we did. It was not an event. It was not another persona. We really worked to integrate our relationship with Christ as individuals and into our family, which meant sometimes not meeting the
Mm.
expectations that others had of us, or even of our kids. As pastors' kids, they're kind of set up on kind of a unrealistic expectation. And we tried our best to let them be on their own journey of discovering who Jesus wanted them to be, and just came along for the ride. But the main thing that we did was we didn't make Jesus a special occasion. Like it was,
Mm.
we were
Mhm.
talking about these things all the time. When you're 5 and you're having a little problem with your friend, and we say, "Hey, let's pray about this." The little habits that you build into your family at the beginning are the ones that make the difference over the long run.
So good. The integration of the daily conversation, making sure Jesus is a part of it all. That's such good wisdom. Thank you for that. Well, let's talk a little bit more about your passion of equipping men. Was there some catalytic experience that made you go that direction? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I in this process of serving families for I've been in vocational ministry since 1988, actually. And whether that was serving families as a youth pastor or serving them as a senior pastor, that what I noticed in other cultures is that they set up systems that allow young people and children to know when they were moving from one stage to another. The other thing that I noticed was that in our academic school systems, that they don't really prepare kids for life. right? Like how often have we
Mhm.
said that we wish the
Yes.
public schools had an accounting class or had a and and then on the third thing was I talked to so many dads who really want to be good dads, like they want to do a good job. They just didn't know what was expected of them. And so I wanted to come up with something that would do two things. Number one, give dads confidence that they can be the dad that God has designed them to be. They just
Mm.
need a plan. Men are going to be most successful when they know what is expected and they have a plan to accomplish it. And so I wanted to be able to come up with something that would help them understand that at each stage in my kid's life, that I can be intentional and I can equip them with the confidence and the competence and the courage that they're going to need to be able to navigate life. But the other thing that was really important was that men, we tend to live isolated, and we needed something that could help connect men at a deeper level. And when you start talking about being a dad and you start looking back into some of the men as they've had challenges in their family of origin in their life, right? That has caused even more frustration and anxiety about what kind of dad that they're going to be. When they get to share that kind of journey in a community, you begin to build a culture of fathering that benefits the entire community. So you give guys a chance to be intentional about preparing their kids for life, and you create a community that benefits the larger community, and men don't have to live so isolated.
Hmm. Wow. And we're designed for community, right? But we don't always know where to
Absolutely.
find it and then how to implement it. And that's part of your program that you go through with dads, right? The Dad Academy. Tell us a little bit more about that program.
So Dad Academy is a 7 session process that comes with a workbook here. That my graduate degrees are in strategic leadership, and my pastoral bent is in spiritual formation. So, how could we combine these things to really help prepare men? So, the 7 sessions are built in a kind of a small group setting. There's 7 15-minute videos. You fill out the workbook. There's about 5 or 10 minutes of homework every week. And the first 3 sessions has a man look at himself, trying to discover his values, his relationship with his spouse, or his kids' moms, because not every
Hmm.
family is the biological mother and father in the same house. So, how to navigate some of those relationships, how to deal with your history, your family of origin, or even places where you failed. So, the first 3 sessions are about dad. The next 3 sessions are about the 3 things that a dad gives a kid: courage, competence, and confidence. Courage comes from knowing that they can trust dad, that dad is going to be present and dad is actively engaged intentionally in their lives. Competence is about that as a dad, you're preparing your kids with the necessary skills that they need, both emotional intelligence and experiential intelligence. Like whatever you know how to do, you need to make sure your kids know how to do that. Whatever you
Mm.
don't know how to do, you need to invite people into their lives who can give them those skills that you don't have and build a community or a tribe around them that are geared for their success. And the last thing is about confidence. When you know who you are, then those things are kind of defined by a family's rituals and traditions. And after 7 sessions, a guy actually walks away with a tangible plan of how to address each one of these issues, a calendar that dad should be really involved in every major milestone, whether it's birthdays, graduations, what have you, that dad needs to be present and part of the planning and use those moments to help his kids understand, hey, you were here, but now you've taken this next step. And with this next step comes some great privileges, but it comes with greater responsibility and greater expectations, defining them for that. And then the kids know how they can become successful. And the cool thing about it is, like any plan that you have, this can be reviewed at any time and updated as your kids go through different seasons of their lives. So that when you reach to that point where you get to release them, you know that you've done the very best you can for them to have them prepared to walk down the road that God has for them.
Hmm. Yeah. Wow, that's so good. And it's structured in such a way that again it is equipping, but it's allowing opportunity to ask questions and to clarify and then to implement it in their own structure in their own homes. So that's such a great practical tool that they can use. So you work,
Two things that have happened that were really cool. Sorry to interrupt, Paige, but
yeah.
we've had groups where there has been uh, one man that I knew bought it for his two sons who both had small kids, and bought it for his father. And we had three generations of dads
Wow.
trying to reshape their family culture. Like the grandpa felt bad about like that he wasn't present around for his son's life. But now as a grandpa and as a great grandpa, he has nothing but time to invest into his family and to change the legacy that he left behind. The greatest thing too is
Hmm.
that when you have dads in different stages who are coming together to learn from one another, all the videos do is to create talking points, right? Because in an hour long session, the video is only 15 minutes. The rest of it is guys engaging with one another, sharing their life with one another. We had a powerful moment when a man who had just been released from prison, he's trying to reintegrate with his family. We went through the session of family of origin. And the man who happened to be leading the group just had a passion for men. His kids were grown, was a men's ministry director, found value in Dad Academy. As the guy began to talk, he just said, I don't know how to do this. And the man running the group just said, Hey, um, would you mind if I just gave you a hug? And it was a life-changing moment for this man. And
Hmm.
that's really the dream of Dad Academy is not just that dads have a plan, but that we create a culture of fatherhood in our world. Fathers are so absent. I don't know if you've read this, but the U.S. has the largest percentage of and number of single parent homes in the world. In
Hmm.
the world,
Wow.
not just the number of, but the percentage of. And that over 40% of people have grown up without a dad in their home. Well, I'll tell you what, in my church, I've got single moms who need fathers to come alongside of them. And I mean, again, I don't mean to be like getting my preach on, but when you talk about revival, the last book of the Old Testament says this is what it's going to look like when the kingdom of God starts to become ready to come. I'm going to start to turn the hearts of the fathers to their children and the hearts of the children to their fathers. When I think about what revival looks like, I'm so thankful for like what's happened at Asbury. And I've lived through like probably a dozen significant moves of God in the body of Christ here in the US in my life. But that's the thing that I'm looking for.
Hmm.
That's the thing that I'm looking for. And it's a thing that I think will transform communities. And so
So then what do you think is preventing that? Like what is the biggest issue facing maybe dads or even men today, particularly in the American culture?
um in that in Nashville, when I spent 5 years in Nashville, this is not going to be a short story. So hang in here with me
Okay.
because it's still pretty raw. There's uh, a kid that was in my youth group. I'm 25. He's 15. Right? We're living in Nashville. We have no extended family with us. My wife and I were building our own life together. It's where our children were born. And this young man, his family, his older sister was a part of my volunteer youth staff. His younger brother was a part, and they would invite us to be a part of their family every other Friday night. We'd go out to dinner, go out to a movie. Um, I'm a poor youth pastor. My car broke down on the day my wife goes to have our first baby. We brought our baby home in this kid's truck, right
Oh,
from the
wow.
hospital. They just
Hmm.
loved on us and cared for us, and we have maintained a relationship. Well, now he's super successful, 40, 45 years old. um, everything going for him. And took his kids to school 2 weeks ago, Friday, drove down a country road, walked out into the woods, and took his own life.
Hmm.
Suicide is the number two killer of men in the U.S. It's number two for men 40 to 65. It's the number two killer next to heart disease. 3/4 of all the people who commit suicide are men over the age of 25.
Hmm.
So there is a quote, and I wish I would have it, the author at the top, but it said that men lead lives of quiet desperation.
Hmm.
And I think it's because we just are so bound by the expectations that are around us. It's a really interesting thing what the scripture says that in Ephesians 3 says, husbands, love your wives, right? But in First Peter, I believe, First Peter 3, um, it says, but wives, respect your husbands, right? And so men are going to continually be pulled to the place where they are feeling affirmed and valued, right? And that's why you get guys that are chasing, like, look how big the tires on my truck are. Look at my new bass boat. Look at my vacation home. Look at my, like, they want to be affirmed. When my wife and I do marriage conferences and we get to talk and counsel married couples, what we end up finding is that we have wives who love their husbands but don't respect them, and husbands who respect their wives and don't love them. And this idea of being respected and admired is such a driving force in a man's life because that's the way that God has created them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when you don't feel like you know what you're doing, or you're looking for validation for your accomplishments in a perform for love culture. There's an old book from the early 90s that said men are not valued for their gold. And so I think that there is a struggle that every guy goes through. And the struggle is this, like my my friend who I just attended his funeral service was surrounded by people who loved him. It's not that he didn't know people who loved him. It's that he knew that there was no escape from his situation, and he was unwilling to do two things: invite people in to share the journey with him, because nobody could have fixed it for him, right? He didn't want to admit that he was facing bankruptcy and that all the people who were dependent on him, that he completely failed. He didn't just fail his immediate, he left a wife and 4 kids under 10. Like, what causes a man that to think that the world's going to be better off without me? Most men, somewhere in their soul, feel that.
Wow.
And that can only be adjusted when men learn how to be intimate with the Lord, right? What
Mm-hmm.
was the first thing that the Father spoke to Jesus when he came up out of the baptism? This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. And Jesus hasn't done anything yet, right? We forget that God is pleased with us before we prove ourselves. But we live in a world where men are forced to prove themselves over and over and over. And that's why we just throw up our hands and say, I'm out of this family thing. I'm going to just feed, at the very least, I'm just going to feed whatever makes me feel better about me, because nobody in my life makes me feel valued or feel significant. And so, if I can connect guys to the greatest purpose and privilege, the fact that God trusts you to have somebody to shape and to form their life, well, that should be a little scary. Like, what an incredible privilege and partnership. God's inviting you to partner with Him in the most significant thing that's ever going to happen in your life. Man, let's see marriages get healthy. Let's see dads living with their with a great sense of purpose and uh, connect them to their passion and connect them to intimacy with God and learn what it is to journey with others. Um, I really think that if we can get men engaged in this process, we will start to see a shift in our entire culture.
Hmm. So you had spoken about them finding significance, obviously, just intrinsically because God has created them. And you're
Yes,
also talking about they need to find it also in community of other men, which I
yes.
think is so valuable. Speak to the wives who want to love, support, and respect their husbands to remind them that they're significant. Like, how can wives love and respect their husbands well in this area?
Oh, I think now, see, even asking that question, I immediately go to where I fail my wife in loving her,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're asking me, and I'm going to sound like in responding back to you that I'm the perfect husband, right? That's a barrier. That's a barrier that men have. Like I was
Yeah.
teaching a dad academy over COVID online. I was at home and my daughter and my wife were online. And as I'm working and I'm doing stuff, we're in the process of Dad Academy helping guys discover their values. Because values are not what you want to be, values are what you do, right? It's
Okay.
behavior that's based in a belief. And I was hearing my wife and daughter telling all these stories and talking, and I'm distracted. I'm a good multitasker, but I hear them talking, and one day they're like, "Oh, Dad doesn't want to do that," and the next day they're like, "Well, Dad's not going to want to eat that," and then the third day, same kind of conversation. Well, that's not his dad's kind of thing, and I felt the Lord just speak to me in my heart. Dad wins. That's the value of the Hamilton family. That everybody revolves their opinions and the stuff around me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a failure. No, it's
Hmm.
just it's an incredible moment with the kindness of God to want to continue to shape me and direct me. I love my wife. She's amazing. We're both firstborn, so we have opinions. She is a people pleaser. She's a people pleaser. I'm a driver. Those two things don't often. We had a conflict this morning uh, about she needed to reply to somebody who was asking her a question that I needed to answer. So she wants to make the relationship good. I'm not ready to answer the question that they have, and it causes tension between us.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
with that preamble, just making clear that I'm not the perfect husband, and my kids will tell you I was not the perfect dad. I will tell you that the thing that is missing in most wives' lives for their husbands is saying thank you. And it's because most women, to be honest, work harder than men. My wife doesn't come downstairs at 5:30 in the morning without, I mean, she's super disciplined, right? But so she's bringing down laundry, right? Today's her day off. She's checking off bathrooms, grocery shopping, blah, blah, blah. I'm sitting here getting to do a cool video with somebody, right? And I'm going to go home
Right.
and study and kind of play around this afternoon, go to baseball practice. It doesn't look like I'm accomplishing anything, right? But I'm like, listen, Jamie and I do say, you have the spouse that you've created, right? The things you affirm and the things you confront or shape a person. And so rather than, uh, the trash is the illustration that we use the most is that, you know, most wives hate telling their husband to take out the trash, right? Can you just take out the trash? Can you just, even if it takes you 8 times to tell him to take out the trash, when he takes it out, when he comes back in, even though you're irritated with him, give him the biggest kiss on the mouth, pat his little rear end, and tell him, "Thank you so much. This means so much to me." It's like Pavlov. Ring the bell, feed the dog. Ring the bell, feed the dog. We're not that complicated as guys, right? So the
Yeah.
behavior that you want to change, affirm when it's accomplished. And I promise you, we will gravitate towards that. We will gravitate towards that path. And it's hard because it's very different. Wives think like, well, if he really loved me, he would do this without me asking him. No, it's just not
Mm.
on our radar,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Mm.
Like my wife and I have very different opinions on when the trash is full. I'm a guy. It's not full until I can't step on it and press it down any further,
Yeah.
right? Hers is full. It needs to be taken out if there's a Kleenex in it
Mm,
because
very different.
she likes everything empty, right? And the minute that there's something else in there, she has something that she has to do. I'm not even thinking about that. And so the expectations are very different. And eventually, if I know I'm going to get rewarded for taking out the trash, what am I going to start looking to do?
Hmm.
Take out the trash. And then you'll feel loved because then you won't have to ask me anymore.
Right.
So whatever little things that he that you want him to do, make a big deal about it because we will always gravitate. Why do men work overtime? Because the paycheck says that you're important. That's how you're getting affirmed. That's where your value is. Why do I have a cool car? Because the guys around me think that we gravitate towards wherever we're affirmed. And so the more that we can find that kind of affirmation, because most of life is set up for men to fail. But that's why I love sports. That's why I love coaching young men. You mean I only have to be right 3 times out of 10 as a baseball player and I can be in the Hall of Fame, right? I just have to bat 300. I can fail 7 times. That does not work at the Hamilton home, right? She expects me to hit like 95%.
Right.
Right? So sports becomes a tool that we can reshape men on how to deal with failure, how to deal with boundaries, how to understand that it's the little things that determine one's success, that a particular event doesn't determine your worth. That's why I love coaching, man. It's such a great discipleship tool for young men.
Hmm.
And
And it speaks their language, right? Like you said, it comes alongside them and it helps them understand from a different perspective a language that they are already speaking. So I
without
think
a doubt,
that's so great. Well, tell us or tell the listeners where they can find your Dad Academy and all the other resources that you have for them.
sure, go to dadacademy.info. Uh, And there's a couple different ways to do that. If you're a church leader, or maybe you're just a little league coach and you want to connect the dads in your community, this is a super easy tool. A Dad Academy is kind of like a membership that once you buy it, you always have access to the videos. You always have access to the plan. And I mean, we've had guys that take their wives through it with them because it's produced such a change in what they want to be as a family culture. There's other resources that are going to be available, such as rites of passage, how to plan a rites of passage event. We have available on sample dad plans, and so that you can see how to put those kind of things together. But I really hope that I primarily work with churches and with Christian schools because it is so scripturally based that this becomes a tool where we can see the heart of Father God begin to penetrate our churches and our communities through men who are connected to their greatest purpose. So dadacademy.info, and you can reach me there. We also have Dad Academy on Instagram, Dad Academy on Facebook, Dad Academy on TikTok, and the dancing is limited
Wait.
on
I
TikTok.
was going to say, hold on. Now you're offering TikTok. We definitely need to see the dances. I can
Uh,
teach dads
they're
how to do TikToks.
they're on there. So if you
Oh
need a
my
partner,
gosh.
oh well, so when
Nice.
I coach, so I have the privilege of getting to coach some high level athletes. One of the girls in my youth group just came back from Rice on a recruiting trip to play soccer, right? And those ding dongs are always getting me in of their like I'm almost their grandpa's age, right? But I'm down, man.
Nice.
I'm in the part of the
Nice.
American Bandstand generation. You can't get that. I can hit the
Wow.
gritty.
Well, I love to hear that. I'm definitely going to check that out. I know my kids are the same. They try to make me do it and I look a fool, but you know what? It's fun, right? We're bonding with the kids. That's what it's
Uh,
about.
Speaking the
Oh
language for
gosh.
sure.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Oh,
all those places. But
excellent.
dadacademy.info is probably the place to start. And there's a cool little download there for any guy that wants to just think about it. It's called The Three Responsibilities of a Father. Simple little checklist that gets you thinking about how to be intentional.
Excellent. Well, Jeff, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for all this wisdom. I know it's going to be really helpful, not only for the dads out there, but also for the wives. So thank you.
Oh, Paige, thanks for the time. Sorry to ramble on so much, but you've been a great host. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. All right. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Jeff. Here are a few of my takeaways, which I'm sure you picked up on as well. I love the fact that Jeff was talking to us about how dads not only have such an important role in their family life, but how they can find community, how they need to find their significance through their intrinsic value and who God has created them to be. And then walking through something like this program of Dad's Academy. One of the emphasis that he pointed out was the 3 C's. And don't you love that? Don't you love when people come up with things that are easy to remember? He came up with courage, competence, and confidence. I'm going to say it again. Courage, competence, and confidence. So with the courage, dads get to project that sense of trust in their kids. He was talking about how kids can't necessarily go out and risk things on their own unless they feel like they have a stable foundation of a father figure in their lives that makes them feel secure enough to go out and risk things. So that's bittersweet. I think back to my own kids where, they try to create a zip line in my backyard off of my porch. It's probably because they felt safe. That's a bonus. The obvious downside to that is that they could have broken their arms or worse, right? So it's that emphasis that we want our kids to feel safe, but we also want them to partner with us when they make some of those riskier choices. So that's the courage piece. The competence piece is that we get to teach our kids things that we are good at, things that we feel like we can be successful in. But I love Jeff's emphasis that if there is something, an area that we don't know much about, we bring in other people to speak into our kids so that it encourages them to grow in their knowledge area so that they can ultimately become a successful adult. And this can be anything from, like my husband, for instance, he is phenomenal when it comes to building and construction. Granted, that's his field. So he helps my kids, my daughters too, to learn how to hammer nails, to measure, to do all of those things. But other stuff, he doesn't know how to work on cars. So he invites other men into my kids' lives to help them teach some of those things. So again, we're getting well-rounded knowledge, but we're allowing other people to speak into our kids' lives so that they can build those competence. And finally, confidence. So he talked a little bit about creating rituals and traditions, helping our kids know that we love them, that they're safe with us, they're known in our family, and that they can have confidence that they can rely on us. So those 3 things he emphasized, this again is part of his Dad's Academy, so that it highlights some of the areas that dads may not know what to pour into their kids. Well, now you have the 3 C's that you can walk alongside. So it's a plan. We love having plans, don't we? Another thing that I took away, and this is more for the spouses, the wives out there, I had asked the question of how can we support our husbands? How can we make them feel more respected or supported by us, loved by us? And one of the things he pointed out was just saying thank you. I mean, how many times do we go throughout our day and our husbands just do things because that's the expectation? They just do them. That's part of the flow and the nature of living in a family. That's just what happens. We don't always think and appreciate and the value of an appreciation. So for instance, one of my love languages is acts of service. My husband knows this. So he knows when he goes above and beyond and vacuums when it's my week to vacuum, or he does my laundry and puts it away. Like, hello, that's a huge love tank filler for me. Do I always thank him? Well, gosh, now that I think about it, I hope I do. But to be intentional about looking him in the eye, giving him a hug and saying, I appreciate it so much that you provide for this family, or I appreciate it so much when you love our babies well. That is one of the things that just blesses my heart is when I hear him having conversations or being goofy or even just hugging my kids. I have that opportunity to show him and highlight how much I appreciate that. And as Jeff was saying, that can be really instrumental in encouraging our husbands to feel like they're doing a really great job. So those are a few things that I took away from this conversation. I highly recommend that you guys go check out the Dad's Academy. He has some free resources as well that he could send your way that I think could just be great conversations, not only for dads, but also for their spouses. He even mentioned that grandparents are going through this because maybe they missed the boat on what it means to be a dad in a healthy way. So there's resources for all generations. It is never too late to change the way that you parent and disciple your kids. I need you to hear me say that, friends, because I think sometimes when our kids are teenagers, it's like, well, we could just got 2 more years before they're out of here. No, we get to implement these changes now with the hope that then they'll come back and remain in relationship with us. There's a lot of power and value in that. So again, I hope that you enjoyed this episode of Embracing Your Season. Continue to tune in because we have every single week awesome conversations that hopefully encourage and equip you. So can't wait to see you next week, guys. Have a great week.